The engines were already rumbling in the underground garage. 3 black SUVs, 10 armed men, and the most feared mafia boss in the city stepping toward his car. Everything was routine. A quiet morning, a simple departure, until a little girl, no older than 7, came sprinting down the ramp, barefoot, breathless, eyes wide with terror. She threw herself in front of the boss's SUV and screamed, "Wait! Don't start your cars!" The guards froze. Guns were raised. Everyone thought she'd lost her mind. But the girl wasn't looking at the men. She wasn't looking at the boss. She was staring at the vehicles themselves, like she could see something no one else could. The mafia boss stepped forward, irritated. "Why?" he growled. "What did you see?" The girl didn't blink. Instead, she slowly pointed to the bottom of the SUV, her hand trembling as she whispered, "There's something under it, and it's ticking." Suddenly, the entire garage fell silent. One guard crouched down, checked with a flashlight, and his blood ran cold. What they found next didn't just shock the mafia boss. It changed the entire direction of the war he didn't know he was already in. Stay with me until the end, because what they discovered under those cars uncovered a truth that shook the entire criminal underworld. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Vincent Torino had ruled the Eastern District for 23 years. His name was whispered in back alleys, spoken with reverence in boardrooms, and never mentioned above ground without consequence. At 58, he carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who had never needed to raise his voice to be heard. His gray hair was perfectly styled, his suit tailored to perfection, and his eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had built an empire on fear and respect. This particular Tuesday morning had started like every other. Coffee at 6:15, security briefing at 7, departure at 8:30 sharp for a meeting with the city council members who had been very cooperative with his construction projects. Vincent's routine was sacred. Predictable patterns kept him alive in a world where unpredictability usually meant death. The underground garage beneath his penthouse was a fortress. Reinforced concrete walls, motion sensors, armed guards stationed at every entrance, 3 escape routes, 2 elevators that required fingerprint access. This wasn't just parking. It was a war room designed for survival. Tommy Marchetti, Vincent's head of security, had already completed the morning sweep. Every vehicle checked, every corner examined, every shadow investigated. The man had been protecting Vincent for 8 years, and his paranoia had kept them both breathing. Today felt no different than any other day. Vincent's driver, Carlo, had warmed up the lead SUV. The second vehicle carried 4 bodyguards. The third held backup equipment and additional personnel. This convoy had made the same journey hundreds of times without incident. But today, something was different. The little girl materialized like a ghost. One moment the garage was empty except for Vincent's crew. The next, she was there, running down the concrete ramp that led to the street level. Her feet were bare, slapping against the cold floor. Her dress was torn and dirty. Her dark hair flew behind her as she ran with the desperation of someone fleeing for their life. Vincent's guards reacted instantly, weapons drawn, safety protocols engaged. Tommy stepped in front of his boss, hand reaching for his holster. But the girl wasn't armed. She wasn't carrying anything except pure terror. She threw herself across the front of Vincent's SUV, arms spread wide, breathing hard enough that her words came out in gasps. "Please," she said, looking directly at Vincent. "Don't start your cars. You can't drive them. Not yet." Tommy's gun was halfway out of its holster when Vincent raised his hand. Something about the child's eyes stopped him. They weren't the wild, unfocused gaze of someone having a breakdown. They were sharp, alert, and absolutely certain. "Kid, you picked the wrong garage to play in," Tommy said, his voice carrying the edge that made grown men reconsider their life choices. "Walk away. Now." But the girl didn't move. Instead, she pressed herself closer to the SUV, her small hands flat against the black metal. "There's something wrong," she insisted. "Something bad. I saw him put it there." Vincent studied her face. In his line of work, you learn to read people quickly. Fear was easy to spot. Lies were usually obvious. But this girl showed neither. She showed knowledge. And knowledge, in Vincent's experience, was the most dangerous thing of all. "What's your name?" Vincent asked, stepping closer. "Sophia," she whispered. "Sophia, how did you get in here?" The girl pointed toward the emergency stairwell. "The door was open. I was hiding. I saw the man with the tools." Tommy and Vincent exchanged glances. The emergency stairwell required a keycard. It was never left open. Never. "What man?" Vincent's voice was quieter now, more focused. Sophia's eyes darted toward the shadows near the far wall. "He came down after you left yesterday. He had a bag. He crawled under your cars. All three of them. He was there for a long time." Vincent felt something cold settle in his stomach. Yesterday evening, he had attended a dinner with potential business partners. The garage had been empty for nearly 4 hours. Security footage would show any intruder, but Vincent was beginning to suspect that whoever had been down here knew exactly how to avoid the cameras. "Show me," Vincent said. Sophia pointed to the front wheel well of the lead SUV. "There." He put something there. "It's small, but it makes a sound, like a watch ticking." Tommy was already moving, pulling a flashlight from his jacket. He dropped to his knees beside the vehicle, shining the beam into the wheel well. For a moment, there was only silence. Then his face went pale. "Boss," Tommy said, his voice tight. "We got a problem." Vincent crouched down beside his security chief. There, attached to the frame with industrial adhesive, was a small black device. Wires, a digital display, and yes, the soft, rhythmic ticking that Sophia had heard. "How long?" Vincent asked. Tommy examined the device more closely. "Timer shows 18 minutes. This thing's been counting down all night." Vincent's blood turned to ice. 18 minutes until what? Until detonation? Until transmission? Until whatever plan was in motion reached its conclusion. But there was something else. Something that made Vincent's survival instincts scream warnings. If there was one device, there would be more. And if someone had planted bombs on his vehicles, they weren't planning to kill him in the garage. They were planning to kill him on the road, in public, where the explosion would send a message to every criminal organization in the city. "Check the others," Vincent ordered. Tommy moved to the second SUV. Same location, same device, same countdown timer. The third vehicle yielded identical results. Vincent stood slowly, his mind racing through possibilities. Someone had declared war. Someone had access to his building. Someone knew his schedule well enough to plant these devices during the exact window when the garage would be empty. But who? The Castellano family had been quiet for months. The Russians were focused on their port operations. The Irish were dealing with internal struggles. None of the usual suspects had the resources or the motivation for this level of assault. Vincent looked down at Sophia, who was still pressed against his SUV, watching the adults with the wide-eyed attention of someone far older than her years. "Sophia," he said gently, "the man you saw, can you describe him?" The little girl nodded. He was tall, he had dark hair, and he had a scar. She traced a line across her left cheek. "Here," like someone cut him. Vincent's world tilted. He knew that scar. He had put it there himself 15 years ago, during a negotiation that had gone very wrong. The man who carried that mark had sworn vengeance before disappearing into witness protection. Marco Santini, Vincent's former lieutenant, his most trusted advisor, and the one man who knew every detail of Vincent's security protocols. The betrayal cut deeper than any bullet Vincent had ever taken. Marco Santini, the man he had trusted with his life, his family, his empire, the man who had sat at Vincent's dinner table, who had been godfather to Vincent's nephew, who had sworn blood loyalty in the old traditions. 15 years ago, Marco had tried to sell Vincent out to the FBI. The scar was a reminder of Vincent's mercy. He could have killed Marco that night. should have killed him. Instead, he had marked him and let him disappear into the Federal Witness Protection Program. Now Marco was back, and he was playing for keeps. Vincent's mind raced through the implications. If Marco knew about the garage, he knew about the penthouse security. If he knew the vehicle routines, he knew the meeting schedules. And if he was bold enough to plant bombs, he was planning something much bigger than simple assassination. Tommy, get forensics down here. I want every inch of this garage swept for additional devices. Check the elevators, the stairwells, everything. Boss, what about the meeting with the council? Vincent glanced at his watch. The city officials were expecting him in 40 minutes. These were men who didn't appreciate being kept waiting, men whose cooperation was essential for the waterfront development project that would legitimize half of Vincent's operations. But walking into that meeting now felt like walking into a trap. Cancel it, Vincent said. Tell them I'm dealing with a family emergency. Sophia had been watching this exchange with the intense focus of someone trying to understand adult conversations that danced around dangerous truths. Vincent noticed her shivering in the cold garage air. Sophia, where are your parents? The little girl's expression darkened. My mama works upstairs. She cleans the offices at night. She doesn't know I'm here. Vincent felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. The cleaning staff had access to the building after hours. They had key cards for emergency exits, and they were invisible to most security protocols because they were considered harmless. What's your mother's name? Elena Vasquez. Vincent knew Elena, a quiet woman from El Salvador who had worked for his building management company for 3 years. Single mother. No criminal connections. No reason to be involved in Marco's revenge plot, unless she wasn't involved by choice. Tommy, I need you to locate Elena Vasquez immediately. Bring her down here, but do it quietly. And check if any of our cleaning staff called in sick yesterday or today. While Tommy made the calls, Vincent knelt down to Sophia's eye level. The child had saved his life, but he still didn't understand how she had known to look for the devices. Sophia, why did you come down here? Why were you hiding? The girl bit her lower lip, the way children do when they're about to admit something they think might get them in trouble. The scared man told me to watch the cars, she said quietly. Vincent felt ice forming in his veins. What scared man? Yesterday, when Mama was working, a man came to our apartment. He was crying. He said bad men were going to hurt him if he didn't do something. He said if I saw anyone trying to start the black cars, I should stop them. The picture was becoming clearer and more disturbing by the moment. Marco hadn't just planted bombs. He had used a child as his early warning system. But why? What possible advantage could there be in preventing the explosion, unless the explosion wasn't the real plan? Unless the bombs were meant to be discovered? Vincent stood abruptly, his mind racing through the possibilities. Marco knew Vincent well enough to predict his reactions. If the bombs were found, Vincent would cancel his public appearances. He would lock down the building. He would go into defensive mode, which meant Marco wanted Vincent trapped in the building. Tommy, how's that sweep coming? Forensics found 2 more devices. One in the elevator shaft, one near the main electrical panel. But boss, these things aren't set to explode. They're transmitters. Vincent's blood turned to ice water. Marco wasn't trying to kill him. Marco was tracking him. Every move, every location, every conversation was being broadcast to someone. But who? The answer came from an unexpected source. Sophia tugged at Vincent's jacket with small, insistent fingers. The scared man said the FBI lady was coming today. He said she would ask about the old days. Vincent's world collapsed and rebuilt itself in the span of a heartbeat. This wasn't just about Marco's revenge. This was about something much larger, much more dangerous. The federal government was making a move, and Marco was their inside man, which meant the meeting with the city council hadn't been canceled in time. Federal agents were probably already positioned around City Hall, waiting for Vincent to walk into what they believed would be a routine arrest. But Vincent Torino hadn't survived 23 years at the top of the criminal hierarchy. by being predictable. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 2 years. "Detective Morrison? It's Vincent. I have information about a federal operation that's about to go sideways. Meet me at the usual place in 1 hour, and bring your recording equipment." Tommy stared at his boss in disbelief. "Vincent, what are you doing?" Vincent looked down at Sophia, who was still shivering in her torn dress. This little girl had risked her safety to save his life. Her mother was being coerced by federal agents. And somewhere in the city, Marco Santini was waiting for news that Vincent Torino was finally in custody. But Vincent had learned long ago that the best defense against betrayal wasn't retaliation. It was turning the betrayer's plan against itself. "I'm going to give the FBI exactly what they want," Vincent said, his voice carrying the cold satisfaction of a chess master seeing checkmate 3 moves ahead. "I'm going to confess." Tommy's face went white. "Boss, you can't be serious." "I'm going to confess that Marco Santini has been feeding information to federal agents while planning terrorist attacks against government officials." Vincent smiled for the first time that morning. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "And I'm going to have a 7-year-old witness to prove it." Prove it. Sophia watched the adults around her with the sharp awareness that comes from living in a world where understanding grown-up conversations could mean the difference between safety and danger. She had learned to read faces, to notice when voices carried hidden meanings, to recognize when the air itself seemed to change before bad things happened. Vincent's confession plan hung in the garage air like smoke from a gunshot. Tommy was shaking his head, his loyalty warring with his survival instincts. The forensics team continued their methodical sweep, finding more transmitters with each passing minute, but Sophia wasn't paying attention to any of that. She was watching the shadows near the emergency stairwell, the same shadows where she had hidden yesterday while the scarred man worked beneath the vehicles, because the shadows were moving wrong. "Mr. Vincent," Sophia whispered, tugging at his sleeve with urgent fingers. Vincent was deep in conversation with Tommy about federal surveillance protocols, about how to turn Marco's betrayal into leverage, about the delicate choreography required to make the FBI believe they were winning while ensuring they lost everything that mattered. "Not now, Sophia," Vincent said absently. But Sophia had learned that sometimes grown-ups didn't listen until it was too late. She had learned this lesson 3 months ago when she tried to tell her teacher that the new substitute was asking strange questions about which children lived alone with single mothers. The teacher had smiled and patted Sophia's head and told her not to worry about grown-up things. 2 weeks later, 3 children from her class had disappeared. Sophia didn't make the same mistake twice. She stepped directly into Vincent's line of sight, planted her small hands on his expensive suit jacket, and spoke with the clear, carrying voice that her mother used when she needed Elena's attention in crowded places. "The scared man is here." Vincent's conversation with Tommy stopped mid-sentence. The garage fell quiet, except for the distant hum of ventilation systems and the soft beeping of electronic devices being cataloged by the forensics team. "What did you say?" Sophia pointed toward the emergency stairwell. "He came back. I saw him watching from the stairs. He has a phone, and he's been talking to someone." Vincent felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came before violence. Marco was here, in the building, close enough to see whether his plan was working, close enough to adjust if things went wrong, close enough to eliminate witnesses. "Tommy, how many men do we have in the building?" 12 on rotation, 4 in the lobby, 2 on the penthouse level, 2 monitoring external approaches, 4 down here with us. Vincent did the mathematics of survival. If Marco was working with federal agents, those agents would be positioned to contain the building once the operation began. Vincent's men would find themselves outgunned and outmaneuvered by trained professionals with legal authority and military-grade equipment. But Marco had made one crucial error. He had underestimated a 7-year-old girl who noticed things that adults missed. "Sophia, I need you to do something very important for me. Can you be brave?" The little girl nodded solemnly. "I need you to take the service elevator to the 3rd floor. Find the office with the blue door, room 312. Inside that office, there's a red telephone on the desk. Pick up that phone and press the button marked emergency. Tell whoever answers that Vincent Torino needs immediate extraction protocol 7. Sophia repeated the instructions back perfectly, her young mind cataloging each detail with the precision that had kept her alive in a world full of dangerous adults. What about Mama? Vincent felt something twist in his chest. In his world, family was everything. Blood loyalty transcended law, transcended fear, transcended even survival itself. But Elena Vasquez wasn't family by blood. She was family by circumstance, by the simple fact that her daughter had risked everything to save his life. Tommy, send Martinez to locate Elena. Bring her to the safe room on 7. Tell her Sophia is safe and that she's not in trouble. As Sophia disappeared into the service elevator, Vincent turned his attention back to the emergency stairwell. Marco was close. After 15 years of exile, 15 years of federal protection, 15 years of planning his revenge, Marco Santini was finally making his move. But Vincent had survived this long by never fighting the war his enemies expected. His phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Vincent, time to talk. Come to the roof. Alone. You have 10 minutes before I call in the federal strike team. Vincent showed the message to Tommy, whose face cycled through disbelief, anger, and grim determination. It's a trap, boss. Marco's trying to isolate you. Of course it's a trap, but it's also an opportunity. Vincent walked to the forensics team leader, a thin man with careful hands who had been documenting transmitters for the past 20 minutes. How many devices have you found? 18 so far. Transmitters, tracking beacons, and 3 that appear to be listening devices. Whoever planned this wanted complete surveillance of your movements and conversations. Can you disable them without triggering alerts? The forensics expert shook his head. These are sophisticated, military grade. Disabling them would send a signal to whoever's monitoring. Vincent smiled. The same cold expression that had earned him his reputation in boardrooms and back alleys across the city. Perfect. I want you to leave them active, but I want you to feed them exactly what I tell you to feed them. 10 minutes later, Vincent stood on the building's roof, the morning wind cutting through his suit jacket. The city stretched out below him, a maze of legitimate businesses and hidden criminal enterprises, all connected by threads of money and violence and mutual dependence. Marco emerged from behind the rooftop access housing. 15 years had changed him. The Federal Witness Protection Program had softened his edges, but his eyes still carried the calculating intelligence that had made him Vincent's most valuable lieutenant. The scar Vincent had given him was a pale line across his left cheek, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Hello, Vincent. Marco, you look well. Prison food must agree with you. Marco laughed, but there was no humor in it. Witness protection, actually. Very comfortable. The federal government takes excellent care of valuable assets. And what makes you valuable, Marco? What could you possibly tell them that they don't already know? Everything. 23 years of operations. Every corrupt official you've bought. Every legitimate business you've infiltrated. Every murder you've ordered. Every life you've destroyed. Vincent walked slowly toward the roof's edge, his hands visible, his movements casual. Below, he could see unmarked federal vehicles positioned at strategic points around the building. Marco's backup plan was already in motion. You always were thorough, Marco, but you always missed the bigger picture. What bigger picture? Vincent turned to face his former lieutenant. You think this is about justice. You think you're the hero in this story, bringing down the evil crime boss. But you're just another piece on the board, and you don't even know what game we're really playing. Marco's confidence flickered for just a moment. What are you talking about? The waterfront development project, the city council meetings, the legitimate businesses I've been building for the past 5 years. You think I'm trying to go legitimate? Vincent pulled out his phone and pressed a button. Immediately, speakers hidden around the rooftop crackled to life, broadcasting the conversation to every transmitter Marco had planted in the building. I've been building the perfect trap. Every corrupt official, every dirty deal, Every federal agent who's been taking my money while pretending to investigate me. Everything you're about to hand over to the FBI will implicate 50% of the federal law enforcement apparatus in this city. Marco's face went white as he began to understand. The bombs weren't meant to kill me, Marco. They were meant to make me look like a victim. The transmitters weren't meant to spy on me. They were meant to record my confession. And that confession is going to destroy everyone who thought they could use Vincent Torino as their stepping stone to power. Vincent pressed another button on his phone. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Those aren't federal agents coming to arrest me, Marco. Those are state police coming to arrest every federal agent whose name appears in the files I've been building for 5 years. Files that document every bribe, every favor, every illegal surveillance operation conducted against legitimate businessmen. Marco stepped backward, his hand moving toward his jacket. You're bluffing. Am I? Sofia Vasquez, 7 years old, has been recording our entire conversation on equipment you didn't know existed. Your threat to eliminate witnesses just became evidence of attempted murder of a child. Marco's hand froze. In the distance, the sirens were getting closer. Here's what's going to happen, Marco. You're going to walk down those stairs. You're going to surrender yourself to Detective Morrison, who's been working with me for 2 years to build a case against federal corruption. And you're going to confess that you were coerced into this operation by agents who threatened your family. I don't have a family. Vincent smiled again. You do now. The federal government gave you a new identity, Marco. Michael Santos, resident of suburban Chicago, married to Linda, father to twin daughters aged 12. The same daughters who have been under my protection for the past 6 months. Marco's world crumbled. You're lying. Protection, Marco, not threat. Your daughters are safe, well cared for, completely unaware that their father used to be a criminal. But if you go through with this federal operation, if you hand over those files, Linda and the girls will learn exactly who Michael Santos really is. Vincent walked toward the rooftop access door. Or you can walk away. Disappear back into witness protection. Let the federal agents who recruited you take the fall for their illegal surveillance operation. Let your daughters keep believing their father is the insurance salesman who loves them more than his own life. Marco stood motionless on the roof, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. He hadn't been running an operation against Vincent Torino. He had been a pawn in Vincent's operation against the federal corruption network that had been parasitically feeding off legitimate criminal enterprises for decades. Why? Marco asked quietly. Vincent paused at the door. Because 23 years ago, you saved my life during the Castellano War. Because blood loyalty runs deeper than betrayal. And because a 7-year-old girl reminded me that some things matter more than revenge. As Vincent disappeared into the building, Marco stood alone on the rooftop, listening to sirens and understanding that some games have no winners, only survivors. Down in the building's main lobby, Detective Morrison adjusted his earpiece and checked his watch. Vincent's call had come exactly when expected. After 2 years of carefully orchestrated cooperation, Morrison understood the delicate balance required to bring down a federal corruption network without destroying legitimate law enforcement in the process. The detectives' team consisted of state investigators who had been tracking illegal surveillance operations for months. They had documented evidence of federal agents accepting bribes, falsifying reports, and conducting unauthorized surveillance against citizens whose only crime was success in industries the government couldn't fully control. Morrison's radio crackled. All units in position. Federal vehicles have surrounded the building, but they don't have jurisdiction for this operation. Through the lobby windows, Morrison could see the confusion spreading among the federal agents. They had expected to arrest Vincent Torino. Instead, they were about to become subjects of investigation themselves. Sofia reached the 3rd floor and found room 3A12. The blue door was exactly where Vincent had said it would be. Inside, the red telephone sat on an otherwise empty desk. She pressed the emergency button and waited. "Emergency Protocol 7 activated," came a calm female voice. "Please identify yourself." My name is Sofia Vasquez. Vincent Torino said to call you. The scared man is here and there are federal people outside. Understood, Sofia. Stay in that room. Help is coming. The phone line remained open, but Sofia could hear activity in the background. Voices coordinating movement, equipment being activated, vehicles being dispatched. Vincent's emergency protocol was more extensive than anyone had imagined. Meanwhile, Elena Vasquez was cleaning an office on the 15th floor when Martinez found her. The security guard's approach was gentle but urgent. Mrs. Vasquez, I need you to come with me. Your daughter is safe, but there's a situation in the building. Elena's English was limited, but she understood danger. She had fled El Salvador precisely to escape situations where men with guns appeared unexpectedly in her workplace. Sofia? Where is Sofia? She's safe. Mr. Torino is making sure of that, but we need to move you to a secure location. As they walked toward the service elevator, Elena tried to process what was happening. She knew Vincent Torino's reputation. Everyone who worked in the building knew, but she also knew he had never been anything but respectful to the cleaning staff, never failed to pay them properly, never created the atmosphere of fear that characterized other employers in her experience. Back on the roof, Marco stood motionless, understanding that his carefully planned revenge had become his own destruction. The federal agents below were about to learn that their operation had been compromised from the beginning. The evidence they expected to collect would instead incriminate them. His phone buzzed. A message from Agent Sarah Chen, his federal handler. Status report. Are you in position? Marco stared at the message, knowing that any response would be recorded by Vincent's equipment. Every word he had spoken, every plan he had made, every threat he had issued was now evidence against the federal operation he had been recruited to lead. He typed back, Operation compromised. Recommend immediate withdrawal. The response came quickly. Negative. Proceed as planned. We have full operational authority. Marco realized that Agent Chen didn't understand the situation. She believed this was still a standard organized crime takedown. She had no idea that Vincent had been building a case against federal corruption for years, using Marco's operation as the final piece of evidence. Down in the garage, Vincent reviewed the forensics report on his phone. 18 surveillance devices, all connected to federal monitoring equipment, all recording conversations that would now be entered as evidence in a state corruption investigation. Tommy approached with an update. Boss, Detective Morrison's team is ready to move. They've identified 12 federal agents involved in unauthorized surveillance. Warrants are being issued. Vincent nodded. What about the city council? Meeting postponed indefinitely. Turns out 3 of the council members were also under federal surveillance. They're cooperating with the state investigation. The irony was perfect. The federal government's attempt to infiltrate Vincent's organization had exposed their own illegal activities. The surveillance equipment meant to gather evidence against him was instead providing evidence against them. Vincent's phone rang. Detective Morrison. Vincent, we're ready to execute. Are you clear of the building? Negative, I'm staying. This needs to be done properly. Vincent walked back down to the garage where it had all started. Sofia was waiting by the service elevator, her small hand holding Elena's tightly. The reunion between mother and daughter was quiet, filled with the kind of relief that comes after surviving something you never saw coming. Thank you, Elena whispered to Vincent in accented English. Thank you for protecting her. Vincent knelt down to Sofia's eye level one final time. You saved more than my life today, Sofia. You saved a lot of people from a very bad situation. The little girl nodded seriously. Will the scared man be okay now? Vincent glanced toward the stairwell where Marco had surrendered himself to Detective Morrison 20 minutes earlier. The federal agents who had surrounded the building were now being questioned by state investigators. The surveillance equipment that was meant to destroy Vincent had instead exposed a network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of federal law enforcement. Yes, Vincent said quietly, the scared man will be okay, and so will his family. As Elena and Sofia disappeared into the elevator, Vincent reflected on the morning's events. A 7-year-old girl's courage had unraveled a conspiracy years in the making. Sometimes the smallest voice carried the most important message. Sometimes paying attention to what others missed meant the difference between destruction and survival.